Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the Grant Introduction Workshop for the 2021-2022 Fair Housing Ambassador Program, brought to you by the City of Houston's Housing and Community Development Department. My name is Kimmy Johnson, and I work for HCDD as the Fair Housing Education and Outreach Coordinator, and I'm also the lead on this funding opportunity. And today I am joined by Ms. Michaela McMurray. Michaela is the account manager at Taylor Collective Solutions, and she's going to be talking about the new and exciting ambassador training sessions that we're offering this year. Next, you're going to hear from a colleague on the Fair Housing team, Megan Rowe. Megan's the Fair Housing Analyst, and she's going to be covering the Fair Housing portion of the presentation. And so I will be back to cover the procurement procedures and the application process for this grant at the end of the presentation. So I just want to cover a few housekeeping matters. So first, this presentation is being recorded and will be posted on our Fair Housing website, so you can reference what was covered during the grant introduction workshop. And as we go through this workshop, please know that you can ask questions at any time, and you can do so by typing into the Q&A box provided at the bottom of the screen, which you can toggle on and off by clicking on the box with a question mark in the middle. And if you're joining this workshop on a mobile device, you can also join the conversation or ask questions using the chat icon. So the agenda is the last of our housekeeping items. And so during this workshop, we're going to be covering a brief overview of the program and an outline what to expect at the ambassador training sessions and why you don't want to miss them. We're going to do a quick review of what fair housing is, and then we'll briefly explore the connection between fair housing and renters in Houston and why we've decided to prioritize renters for this round of fair housing ambassador funding. We're also going to outline our expectations for the program outreach and cover eligible activities for this program, as well as the program's procurement and application process. So we have a full agenda today, but please just stay tuned. City of Houston's Fair Housing Ambassador Program is an ongoing series supporting local organizations and community advocates who are working to decrease housing discrimination and increase fair housing knowledge in their communities. The Ambassador Program is a grant and volunteer program designed to support nonprofits and community groups wanting to conduct fair housing outreach in their communities, and with an emphasis also on reaching historically underserved populations. So this cycle of the program is going to focus specifically on fair housing needs and rights of renters in Houston. The 2021-2022 Fair Housing Ambassador Program has been designed to reach these goals. So rather using this program for case management or building affordable homes, this program is specifically for direct engagement. And grant recipients can use up to $7,000 to address fair housing through outreach, marketing, and education and training, with the emphasis on reaching historically underserved populations. Also, by building new relationships or enriching existing relationships with partner nonprofits and other community groups to further outreach, and by increasing fair housing awareness at the neighborhood level. So it's important to note that grantees will be reimbursed for approved expenditures rather than receiving the funding at the front end. And now I'm going to kick things over to Ms. Michaela McMurray to tell you about the ambassador training sessions. Michaela?
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michaela, and I am an account manager with Taylor Collective Solutions. Thank you all for joining us today for the Grant Introduction Workshop. Taylor Collective Solutions, or TCS for short, is a boutique PR and marketing agency in Austin, Texas, with experience both statewide and nationwide. We have staff across the state of Texas, including Houston, Austin, and Dallas, and we are a proudly female-founded agency. Our team is excited to be working with the City of Houston's Housing and Community Development Department and their staff to provide a 3-part training series about fair housing, community outreach, and the Fair Housing Ambassadorship Program. TCS as an agency has over 35 years of experience in marketing, PR, and communications, and community outreach is our specialty and our passion. Through our community outreach work across the state and nationwide, we have successfully reached communities including historically underserved communities through strategies such as planning nationwide and local press events, organizing marches like the Million Moms March in Washington, D.C., and the Texas Women's March in 2017 and 2021, training community leaders how to go out into their own neighborhoods and engage with residents about important causes, creating digital and social media campaigns, coordinating and planning high-profile interviews and press events to help spread visibility for good causes, and finally, strategic media buying for magazines, television, radio, and other outlets to engage with target audiences, and many, many more strategies which we're excited to share with you during the training series. The Fair Housing Ambassador Program was launched by the City of Houston's Housing and Community Development Department with the goal of supporting local organizations and volunteers who are working to decrease housing discrimination in their communities, and in turn, increase fair housing in their communities. In this free virtual training series, Housing and Community Development Department staff and marketing experts will be showing you best practices on how to conduct community outreach in your own neighborhoods and be a successful fair housing ambassador. Our first session is on Tuesday, November 30th, and will cover the basics of fair housing and initial steps for community outreach, such as how to identify your target audience, which is the critical first step. The second session is Thursday, December 2nd, and will cover fair housing for renters, as well as community outreach strategies and best practices, and how to plan and implement and take a community outreach plan and put it in action. The final session is Tuesday, December 7th, and will cover how to report a housing violation and creating a winning and measurable strategy for fair housing outreach in your neighborhoods. As an added bonus, we're excited to be offering one-on-one and group coaching sessions after the 3 trainings have concluded, so you can ask questions and receive personalized feedback on your ideas and plans to conduct fair housing outreach in your neighborhoods. It is our goal that through the 3 training sessions and our coaching sessions, that you will feel prepared to submit an application to be a volunteer or paid fair housing ambassador for our 2021-2022 program. There are very limited coaching spots available, and participants that attend all 3 of the trainings will be given priority for the one-on-one coaching sessions. By participating in the training sessions, you can expect to learn from fair housing and marketing experts, engage in hands-on activities to practice new knowledge and ask questions, experience opportunities to meet and network with fellow volunteers and organizations across Houston, gain access to a curated packet of resources for your future success, participate in dedicated Q&A time to ask questions and also learn from your peers' questions. And finally, receiving that personalized feedback during the coaching sessions. Community outreach has the power to move thousands, tens of thousands, and hundreds of thousands of people. This photo is an example of community outreach work by Taylor Collective Solutions. This is the 2017 Texas Women's March, and over 100,000 people attended the march and rally at the Texas Capitol in 2017. And at the time, through our community outreach efforts, this was the largest march in Texas history. After the event, marchers were inspired to go back into their communities and contact their lawmakers, canvass, register their neighbors to vote, run for office, and continue to make positive change in their communities for equality. Just like the march, this example is how your community outreach can make a lasting and positive impact for many years to come. And through this training series, you will have the opportunity to learn from experts in the field of marketing, PR, and community outreach for free. We will be sharing our decades of experience in marketing and community outreach and teach you successful strategies to conduct community outreach in your own communities. Skills that we will help you build and refine include how to identify your target audience, best practices for community outreach, how to write a successful proposal for funding or a volunteer fair housing ambassador application, and many other skills to further serve your community. So I hope to see you on Tuesday, November 30th for our first session. And now I would like to introduce Megan Rowe, a fair housing analyst with the City of Houston, to continue the presentation.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Michaela. We are so excited about this training series. I can't wait for the first session. As Michaela said, my name is Megan Rowe, and I am the Fair Housing Analyst here at the City of Houston's Housing and Community Development Department. So let's discuss fair housing. Just a note, before we get started, I will be giving just a very brief overview here, but we will be diving into this information in much greater detail in the first session of our training series. So again, please make sure you've signed up for the Fair Housing Ambassador Workshop. Okay, so let's begin with the Fair Housing Act. The Fair Housing Act, I'll wait for the slides to catch up. The Fair Housing Act was passed in 1968 and is a civil rights law created to put an end to discriminatory practices in any activities related to housing. The act ensures that every person has the right to rent a home, purchase a home, or obtain a mortgage without fear of discrimination due to their membership or perceived membership in a protected class. Under the Fair Housing Act, residents are protected from discrimination on the basis of race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, and disability. Important to note, as of January 20th of this year, sex now includes protection from discrimination for gender identity and sexual orientation. Despite the passage of the Fair Housing Act, however, marginalized groups are still often excluded from access to quality and fair housing, and that continues the legacy of discrimination that we've seen in this country. As mentioned, the Fair Housing Act covers a number of processes around housing and housing transactions. They include the rental or sale of housing services of facilities, advertising, lending and insurance, reasonable accommodations and modifications for people with disabilities, and for those with limited English proficiency, as well as protecting residents from harassment and retaliation. So let's go through some examples of what this might look like. A realtor could not steer a family away from purchasing a home in a predominantly white neighborhood because that family was Black. A bank could not impose a higher interest rate on loans specifically for Hispanic home buyers. A landlord could not produce discriminatory advertisements that say no children or only provide advertisements in English in an area highly populated by people who speak Spanish. Landlords cannot say that a second floor apartment is unavailable to a person who uses a wheelchair, even though it is actually available for rent. Individuals who believe or suspect their rights have been violated should submit a complaint as soon as possible. There are several ways to file a complaint. Texas residents can file a complaint through the Texas Workforce Commission Civil Rights Division. Anyone can file a complaint directly to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, also known as HUD. HUD also provides assistance for people with disabilities who may need help filing a claim through reasonable accommodations and auxiliary aids and services. The number to file a complaint with HUD is 1-800-669-9777, or you can visit www.hud.gov. And finally, Houston has a nonprofit organization called the Greater Houston Fair Housing Center that can assist residents in filing a complaint. That telephone number is 713-641-3247. So let's discuss renters and fair housing. Let's begin with the fair housing complaints we are currently receiving in Houston. Here we have a pie chart depicting the fair housing complaints filed and closed from 2011 to 2020. It shows that over the last 10 years, the two largest shares of complaints by basis are disability discrimination and racial discrimination. And key to this discussion, most of those issues identified in complaints were related to discrimination specifically in rental housing. The city of Houston has 2.3 million people and almost 1 million households. But we have a relatively low amount of housing complaints that are filed each year. On average, about 100 fair housing complaints are reported. This is low for a city the size of Houston. And to be clear, it's likely not because there is a lack of discrimination. In 2019, we conducted the Community Needs Survey, which had a few thousand respondents, and found nearly 1 in 6 survey participants reported experiencing housing discrimination in the Houston area in the past 5 years. In the summer of 2019, we conducted a quick survey at various metro stations throughout Houston. The findings were similar to the Community Needs Survey, with more than 1 in 8 of survey respondents reporting they were discriminated against in housing in the past 5 years. In addition, we also asked if residents knew how to report housing discrimination, and over half said they did not know. We asked respondents what they would do when or if they were discriminated against in housing, and only 15% said they would report it, and almost half, 48.8%, said they would do nothing. This shows that fair housing discrimination is highly likely to be underreported in the city of Houston. This underreporting likely stems from several sources. People don't know their rights under the Fair Housing Act. Residents don't know how to report housing discrimination or fair housing violations. Residents are focused on accessing housing and not reporting discrimination. And frankly, it's sometimes hard to identify when housing discrimination has occurred. We just want to point out that we do have 1 year that's an outlier on this graph. That's 2016, where we had a total of 216 complaints, double what we usually see. In 2016, we were able to utilize funding for a fair housing campaign that directed people to call HUD for help, and we advertised it on metro buses, including Metro Lift. This is likely the reason for the spike and reinforces the fact that appropriate outreach campaigns really can make a difference. That is why we feel so strongly about this ambassador program. So, we've discussed the fair housing complaints we've seen in Houston. There's another aspect of Houston rental market that is also a major concern in fair housing: how rent cost is affecting particular protected classes in our city. Let's break this down. Houston is a majority renter city. Most Houston households are renters, 59.7% of them. The minimum hourly wage in Texas is only $7.25, which means that a minimum wage worker would have to work 115 hours a week to afford this rent, which means they would have to work 3 full-time jobs. Houstonians must earn $21.02 an hour to pay for an average two-bedroom home, average two-bedroom rental home. So this means the reality is over half of Houstonians are paying more than 30% of their income in rent. 51% of renter households may pay more than half of their income in rent. We refer to this as cost burden. A family that is cost burdened means they have fewer financial resources to pay for other needs, such as healthcare, education, or food. This becomes a fair housing concern when we look at what is called disparate impact, or a type of unintentional discrimination in which policies, practices, or in this case, systems, result in a disproportionate impact on a protected group. In Houston, renters' problems disproportionately impact households of color and immigrant communities. 2/3 of Black households and Hispanic households are renters. More than half of Asian households are renters. When compared to non-Hispanic white households, which are only 40% of households that are renters. Houston's average eviction rate is massive at 4.5% and is the third in total evictions by city behind New York City and Indianapolis. According to Eviction Lab's data, in 2016, over 11,000 households faced eviction, a little more than 30 households each day. In other words, in Houston, for every 100 renter homes, 4.5 face eviction each year, according to the Kinder Institute. This disparate impact on Black and Hispanic households continues when we look at eviction. According to January advisors, the Kinder Institute and Eviction Lab, the chance of a tenant losing an eviction case is higher in neighborhoods that are majority Black or Hispanic. You can see this illustrated further by the chart on the right, which illustrates the financial insecurity Houston households are experiencing. With Hispanic immigrant, U.S.-born Hispanic, and U.S.-born Black households all at or above 50% not being able to deal with an unexpected $400 emergency. Luis Guajardo from the Kinder Institute affirmed this point in the 2021 State of Housing Report. The geography of eviction tells us a lot where evictions are occurring. A lot of the high eviction neighborhoods hug the beltway where we see higher numbers of foreign-born or immigrant populations, so tenants might not know their rights to counsel for an eviction filing. So as you can see, there is a clear need for outreach to targeted populations in Houston about their housing rights. I'm going to turn it now back over to Kimmy, who will walk you through the outreach section of this program. Kimmy?
Thank you, Megan. So now we're going to cover program outreach for the program. So as Megan described earlier on the previous slides, that in this particular program, we are focusing our outreach on renters from historically underserved communities. And these include communities of color, persons with disabilities, persons with limited English proficiency, immigrant communities, as well as seniors and low and moderate income households. The City of Houston has reach and resources, but we aren't based in individual neighborhoods and communities the way that community advocates and local organizations are. And because communities in Houston have different needs, we can't reach every community effectively since we can't use the same outreach methods each time. So a one size fits all certainly does not work in a city as diverse as ours. And so for this program, we're relying on your knowledge and expertise about the most effective ways to get information to our targeted populations and what messages will best fit to meet the common goal of ensuring that all Houstonians are informed about their fair housing rights. Remember that this program focuses on educational outreach, and it's a funding requirement. Examples of eligible activities may include conducting educational training and workshops to increase public awareness and understanding of fair housing rights, executing marketing campaigns using mixed media, and finally, developing and distributing marketing materials that share important fair housing information. And at this time, I'm going to cover the eligibility and evaluation criteria for the program. So who should apply? Well, the city is seeking organizations and advocates who are looking to expand their outreach or create a new initiative to address fair housing for renters in Houston. And so these organizations and advocates should be able to work at the neighborhood level to equip residents with knowledge about their fair housing rights and encourage them to take action by filing a fair housing complaint if they suspect that their rights have been violated. So on the next few slides, I'm going to cover the differences between applying to become a volunteer ambassador versus a funded ambassador. So the following are the benefits to apply to both ambassador types. So the first one is the option to attend those awesome fair housing training ambassador sessions that Michaela mentioned earlier, and to have your organization name or logo featured on the HCDD website, a digital fair housing ambassador badge to use on your marketing and outreach materials. We could share or promote your upcoming events or activities across HCDD's communication platforms. And you'll become a go-to fair housing expert in your community. But the single difference between the application types is that the funded ambassadors would be reimbursed up to $7,000 to conduct their outreach activities. Regarding the requirements to be selected, both the funded and volunteer ambassadors will submit a fair housing outreach plan and submit an online application, which we'll cover later. So on the application, volunteer ambassadors must demonstrate an understanding of fair housing, while we ask that the funded ambassadors be able to clearly communicate their understanding of fair housing. And last, priority will be given to funded applicants that attend all three ambassador training sessions, excuse me. But once selected, the volunteer ambassadors will submit a volunteer agreement, while funded ambassadors will sign and return a purchase order addendum before beginning any outreach activities. Both the volunteer and funded ambassadors will be required to reach the number of individuals proposed, and also attend pre-selection, orientation, and wrap-up meetings, and also attend virtual monthly check-ins. And finally, they'd have to both submit a summary report at the end of the outreach period. So this grant does utilize HUD's Community Development Block Grant admin funds. And so selected groups will be reimbursed for eligible costs according to federal regulations for fair housing activities, which include education and outreach to raise awareness around fair housing. And I just want to reiterate that this is a reimbursement-based grant, and all paid invoices will have to be submitted. Each organization selected will receive a maximum of $7,000. For more information on the grant, on the government grant awards just in general, please refer to the Code of Federal Regulations, Title II, Part 200. And if you apply to become a funded ambassador and you're not selected, there is the option to become a volunteer ambassador if you indicate that on your application. Just to quickly reiterate, we're going to be giving priority to the applicants that demonstrate their ability to reach and engage their intended communities and propose activities that will reach and engage their communities, and applicants whose activities that are well planned, organized, and suitable. And lastly, priority will be given to applicants who attend all three of those virtual training sessions. But please note that attending all three sessions does not guarantee that you'll be funded, nor is attending all three sessions a requirement for funding. And at this time, I am going to transition to the procurement procedures in the application for this funding opportunity. So in order to participate, all organizations must be registered as a vendor for the City of Houston and actively registered in the System for Award Management. And if you need to register as a vendor or you just aren't quite sure if your organization is already registered, the Strategic Procurement website, which is purchasing.houstontx.gov, has helpful tools and resources to assist you. But please note that you must have your EIN number, and all requests must be submitted with a W-9 form. And if you have any questions about this process or about vendor registration, please contact the procurement specialist for this program, Clarence, at clarence.moten@houstontx.gov, or you can give them a call at 832-394-6212. So the application period for this grant is now open as of today, and all interested applicants must complete an online application in order to qualify. And that deadline to submit your application is December 14th at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And at this time, I'm going to switch over to show you the different components of the online application. And while I am doing that, while I'm pulling this up, Megan is going to drop that link in the chat in case you'd like to follow along with me. Just give me just a second. Okay, so there are just a few things to keep in mind as you complete the online application and advance through each page. Your responses, depending on your browser, your responses may or may not be saved. And also your application will not be submitted until you click the submit application button on the final page. So this is the first page. It's just an overview of the program, and it explains the difference in the application types and also the important dates to keep in mind. So we'll scroll to the bottom here. I'll click next. Oh, okay, let's try it. Okay, so on this next page, we want you to tell us about yourself and your organization, as well as the communities that you've worked with and the impact of your research, your outreach efforts. And now on page 3, it's the fun stuff. So we ask you to provide information about your proposed outreach plan and identify the primary communities you do intend to reach through your outreach. And on page 4 of this application, you'll indicate if you're interested in becoming a volunteer or a funded volunteer, excuse me, a volunteer or a funded ambassador. So you'll do that on this page. So on the next page, on page 5, we provide examples of eligible and ineligible activities for funding under this grant. On this next page, we ask you just to outline your proposed budget, and you'd need to modify the budget template in order to reflect, let me pick one here. Okay, there's a conflict of interest question that we have added here. So you would select. Okay. Okay, we will fix that. Okay. So on that next page, On the next page is what you would outline your proposed budget, and you need to modify that budget template to reflect the needs of your proposal. And so there's room for about 5 activities on this page, but if you have more, you can upload your file at the bottom. So similar to here, there's a choose file button on that page. And lastly, at the end of that, and I'm sorry we couldn't get past this page. Please click submit application to send your submission our way. So now I am going to maneuver back to the presentation. All right. I just want to remind everyone that in case you've missed anything in today or in this presentation, or want to share this information with your colleague, it is being recorded and will be uploaded to the website following this event. And that website is here on the screen, and I think Megan will also put it here in the chat. So these are just a few key dates to keep in mind as you apply and as you plan those awesome outreach activities that you're going to submit. And so as I mentioned earlier, the applications are now available online and will remain open until December 14th. We estimate that announcements will take place around January 3rd. And the last thing I want to mention here is that the marketing and outreach period will begin around January 24th and end on April 29th. So please plan to complete your activities within that time frame and be sure it's reflected in your application. And before I turn things back over to Megan for the Q&A, I just want to let you guys know again that the ambassador training sessions are filling up fast. Again, those dates are November 30th and December 2nd and December 7th. And the link to register is here on the screen, or you can find it on the HCDD website. I think we'll also drop it in the chat. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. Thanks again for joining us to learn about this funding opportunity. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Megan. Megan?
Thank you, Kimmy. We have now concluded the Fair Housing Ambassador Program Grant Introduction Workshop presentation. But at this time, we will be opening it up for any questions you may have for us. Just before we do, a reminder that if you think of any questions after our presentation has concluded, you're always welcome to reach us at our Fair Housing inbox. The address is listed on the slide, and it's fairhousing@houstontx.gov. Okay, so I'm going to go over to the chat now. I'm going to be joined by Kimmy and our division manager, Mary Itz. I will be reading the questions aloud for our team to answer. So please make sure you type your questions in now if you have not already, and we'll go through them. Okay, let's get situated. Okay, so for our first question, we have from Dr. Kathy Plato, Collaborating Voices. Please explain reimbursement. Are we not going to get funding first? For this knocks out the real boots on the ground, and here comes some of the nonprofits the city's always fund. So basically, a lot of Black and Brown led nonprofits are going to be out, and the same ones get away serving the same people. So color was one of the main discriminations, and so does the block grants go to this. So let's address that. That's a fair question.
Hi, my name is Mary Itz, and I will take this question. This is grant funding that we will be using from the federal government, so we do have to ensure that these funds are spent on eligible activities. So this is a way to do reimbursement. You don't have to wait. If you're a funded ambassador, you don't have to wait till the end of the period to ask for reimbursement. The agreement between the funded ambassadors and the city will take into account, they'll have a payment schedule. So we want to pay by deliverable. So if a funded ambassador, for instance, has an event in February and then another event in April, they can invoice us in the city in after February with the information and all the deliverables from the event or activity in February, and then they can invoice again after their event in April. So we want it to be flexible. We know that it's not the most flexible, just giving money up front, but we are trying to work with organizations so that they can get reimbursed as throughout the period of activity. It does take about a month to be reimbursed from the city, but hopefully, you can work that into the activity.
Okay, thank you, Mary. I believe this answered Bree Sandiford's question, but I'll read it out loud. Is there a reimbursement schedule, or would it be a single disbursement? And as Mary just said, that's up to your agreement. So you can schedule reimbursements, or if you would prefer, at the end as well. Okay.
Sorry. And I just wanted to add there, excuse me, Megan, I just wanted to add there that once selected, we will cover the invoicing process at great length. So that'll be done during the outreach, that'll be done during the orientation. So you'll get we'll establish a full schedule, and we try to make it as flexible and as convenient as possible. So.
And in addition, we do want to pay by deliverable. So please don't, if you want to get paid throughout the process, please don't back end all of your activities till the end, because we do want to pay by deliverable. So each time you do something, we can then pay that deliverable. So hopefully that helps.
And to clarify, when we mean deliverable, an event or some sort of output. So you may, if you did a marketing campaign on social media, that might be, screenshots of social media posts and the schedule, maybe how many people saw each post. If you did an event, it could be pictures of the event, sign-in sheets, that sort of thing. So we're not focusing on receipts. We're not focusing on like line items. It is the total budget for the deliverable. Okay, can funds be used to pay individuals for administrative services? This is from Goodwill Pierre.
So administrative expenses are an eligible activity. However, those administrative expenses have to be in support of a fair housing outreach activity. So for instance, if you do have block walking, an event for block walking one Saturday, you can pay the block walkers, and that would be an eligible expense under this program. If it's admin, just, buy a computer or fund your communications team that is not working on fair housing activities, that would not be an eligible expense. So all the funded activities have to go towards meeting the objective of this grant, which is doing fair housing outreach in communities.
Okay, I see we have some hand raised, but I do not believe we have access to unmuting. So if you could please put any questions in the chat or email us afterwards. Let's see. Okay, I believe. Okay, Nikia Sims. Apologies. Okay, no. Is a DUNS number, SAMS.gov, and/or other registrations required? And yes, the answer is yes.
Yes, if you're not an organization and you don't have a DUNS number, then I believe it would be the number that perhaps your social security number, the number that you put in into the city's vendor system.
And we have a question about who the contract compliance officer is.
So the information for Clarence, if you have questions about that whole vendor process, that information I gave his name and his email and telephone number in the presentation. We'll should be able to drop that in the chat if that's what you need. Sorry, I don't have it up. I'm sharing my screen.
I want to acknowledge all the comments, positive excitement that we have in the chat. We are really thrilled too. This is a program we've been developing for a little while and been listening, and we're really excited to start this cycle. So thank you all for those comments. Let's see. Again, we apologize, but we do need comments put into the chat. And again, if you cannot access the chat, please send any questions to fairhousing@houstontx.gov. That's fairhousing@houstontx.gov. Okay, I'm looking back to see if I have missed any questions. I think we've addressed everything. Okay. Oh, we got something coming in. Thank you, guys. Give it a few more minutes in case anybody is pulling together some last minute questions. And again, if you're like me and the questions hit you, about 20 minutes after you've hit leave, please, again, do not hesitate to send us questions. We are here and happy to answer them. Okay, excellent. So we have a couple more questions that will be emailed. Okay, so before we let you loose, we want to make sure that you guys are aware of some of the resources and outreach materials that we have available that you can use and share with your communities, regardless of if you take part in this grant activity. So on our website, we have downloadable fair housing information in 6 different languages, and Kimmy will drop that link in the chat as well. We also have a landlord-tenant fair housing hotline, and this is free to any caller. This hotline is a great resource if you have any questions, if you're having concerns, whatever you need, and we want people to know that they can call anytime they have landlord-tenant questions or fair housing questions, and often those two are the same thing. So that number is 832-394-6200, extension 5. And finally, a staff member from the Fair Housing team is available to give presentations about fair housing related topics to any type of audience. To schedule a presentation, call 832-394-6355 or contact Kimmy at kimmy.johnson@houstontx.gov. Okay, checking to make sure. And you guys have a wonderful afternoon. Oh, we've got one final question. I think this is a good one. Let's address it, and then we'll let you go. So, how will diversity, equity, and inclusion be incorporated in decision making and scoring? Sorry, Mary, I'm putting you on the spot.
So the scoring, I think we have the evaluation criteria on an earlier slide, but we do want to, the target audience for this ambassador program are renters. And so we do want to hit a diverse set of renters. So, if there's other organizations that you know of in your neighborhood, please, you could partner with them. We don't want to fund all ambassadors in one neighborhood or, that represent one demographic of renter. So we will be looking at trying to get a diverse set of ambassadors who can reach multiple populations. So I hope that answers the question. We do want to have, organizations that are excited to do this and that are prepared and And we know that a lot of community organizations within Houston do this work every day. So we want to help support and try to expand fair housing outreach in Houston.
Okay, thank you everyone. Have a fantastic rest of your day. And again, fairhousing at HoustonTX.gov if you have any questions.